Okay. Good morning, everybody. I think we can get started. There will be quite a few more people expected to join us. Welcome to the third EPRC seminar this year's semester. My name's Carlos Mendez. I'm a co-director at the EPRC. And today we're welcoming Iryna Fil Kristensen, who will be presenting on leadership and governance challenges in delivering smart specialization strategies, with a particular focus on the case study of Stockholm. So the presentation will last around 30 minutes, and in the remaining time, we'll open for questions and discussion from the audience. If you'd like to make an intervention, please feel free to raise your hand. You can also put comments in the chat box throughout, which we can return to at the end. But as I said, we'll have around half an hour for discussion. Before introducing the speaker, I'd like to inform you that the meeting is being recorded, which means that you and your colleagues can have the opportunity to follow the meeting at a later stage. The recording will be made available through an email link sent to you on our YouTube channel. Please feel free also to share on Twitter information about the presentation and any thoughts on the webinar. Okay, so let me present our speaker today. Iryna Fil Kristensen is a lecturer at the Department of Human Geography, Örebro University in Sweden. She has a PhD in economics from the University of Salzburg in Austria, and has extensive postdoc experience, including at the Montreal Business School in the Chair of Innovation and Regional Development, Canada. Iryna has also previous experience as a senior research fellow at Nordregio in Stockholm, specializing in local and regional development with national and international experiences, including working on lots of European and Nordic research projects for Horizon 2020, ESPON and Nordic cooperation programs. Her main line of research is regional policy and regional development, with a particular focus on policy engagement. I think I'll give the floor to Iryna now, if you'd like to share your presentation, please.
Yes, thank you. I will share my screen with you. Okay. Well, thank you very much for this introduction. And the topic of my presentation has been already presented, and I will just say that it's based on a joint paper together with two of my colleagues from Circle, Lund University, and where the idea was to better understand the role of agency in shaping and implementing transformative change. We decided to focus on one case, specific case, smart specialization or implementation of smart specialization strategy in Stockholm, and to actually get this or deeper understanding of how this change unfolds in a very complex setting. We studied and observed these policy processes over an extended period of time. So I will share briefly with you the results of this study. Our point of departure is, of course, in smart specialization, which is really firmly anchored these days in the reformed European cohesion policy. And after a decade, we really accumulated a large number of empirical accounts that came pouring in from different directions. And this resulted in a very complex matrix of success, failures, and good practices. And now when the first programming period is over and we moved to a new programming period, well, moving from S3 1.0 to S3 2.0, there are still a lot of aspects that needs clarifications or remain unclear or need further elaboration. And I will not go into details about these. There are some studies that raise these points. And they also talk about this pragmatic modification to strategic management, or in other words, to reconsider the existing governance models, but also roles and responsibilities of different stakeholders in these regional development processes, which they also agree that will improve next generation of these policies. And well, given that this also the building dialogues and working together is of course strongly recognized, or this multi-level, multi-stakeholder governance is very much recognized in the literature, and the need to create these new forms of governance that goes beyond these traditional ideas of what governance is, traditional forms, so that it would to stimulate more participatory and integrated policy processes. And this has been already discussed in the previous generation of smart specialization, and it did constitute it became a big challenge, and that's something that had been reported in a lot of different cases. So this is nothing new, and given that this idea of multi-stakeholder collaboration and engagement of wide variety of stakeholders, which is envisioned within the framework of smart specialization, this is something that becomes a very important and, well, something that needs to be strongly considered, because policy process is not just a technical process, it's also highly political and social process, and requires consideration of different, or balancing different powers, but also interests of different stakeholder groups. So the fact that multi-stakeholder governance is very important toward transformation is well recognized, but less is known about to what extent the capacity dimension of actors can help facilitate a desired change outcome. And this is something that we decided to focus on in this paper. So smart specialization in metropolitan regions, surprisingly, there is very little or very few accounts of smart specialization implementation in these settings, which is really surprising considering their scale and large populations, but also that innovation and economic growth been considered an urban affair, so to speak. So there is still more focus on peripheral or lagging regions, and that might be explained by the fact that the change or the outcome of these policy processes would be more tangible in terms of results in this type or more, well, peripheral settings than in large metropolitan counterparts, and where they probably will be more as a drop in the sea. As I mentioned, there is still a challenge, the challenge of multi-level governance framework, which is inherent in the smart specialization framework, has been recognized, but there is still not sufficient knowledge about how it should be constructed and managed. And even in Germany, that has a very strong history of successful implementation of innovation strategies, they still found a lot of challenges around smart specialization, and particularly in how regions link to this multi-level governance system within the country. So there are some emerging critical literature that say that currently research pays very little attention to the role of agency and well, in shaping these regional development processes, and there is really a need to develop new forms of leadership in this context of multi-actor strategy processes that would actually support or provide additional support for governance capacity in different territorial settings. Agency plays an important role in this context, as I said, that there is not enough research that really investigates how different actors, how they engaged and what is their role in this regional development or transformational processes. Their importance is definitely recognized, but there is a lot of aspects that still remain rather unclear. And there is this general argument that if regions have a very strong preconditions, then the implementation, policy implementation will be more successful. And it certainly gives certain advantages. And we know that studies that confirm that there is a positive relation between economic growth and institutional quality. So it does provide an advantage, but it doesn't guarantee success. And that will be illustrated in the case of Stockholm. So there is still these different pitfalls that exist, or traps that they are called, related to agency or behavior of different actors, and which can be, for instance, this institutional conflict trap, which is not just about the fact that the setting has a very low corruption and there is a rule of law, but there might exist a great tension between different, or there is conflict of interest between different industries, or industries, academia, regional government, and civil society. So there are different, or it can be a capability trap. So there is smart specialization does require of local and regional governments to take on a new role, which is more proactive role, but there might be a clear lack of simply competences to fill this role, and there will be more reliance on external consultants or experts, and very little experience with managing really complex processes. And we know that the regional development becomes more and more complex. So the role of, so just focusing on creating favorable framework conditions clearly overlooks the role of actors and human agency, how these different actors engage and how they interact and contribute to this process. So there are different actors, they organize in different forms. And in this context, place-based leadership would play particularly an important role, given that smart specialization is all about pooling resources in order to defining areas of specialization, pooling resources to support these areas of prioritization. So the place-based leadership in this context will play a very important role. So as I mentioned, change does not depend on preconditions. If there is a lack of capable actors that can enact this change, and it depends also on actor-specific characteristics, like their competences, networks, and resources, which of course might vary from place to place, but they are just this is what is asked to be considered, which is considered important in this context. And in order to exercise this human agency, it's also important to that these actors are sufficiently empowered and that they participate in the process. Right. Stockholm, just to give you a little bit to introduce the context for you to understand, that give a better understanding of the complexity when it comes to smart specialization implementation in this setting. So this is one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas in Europe, and it is the largest urban area in Scandinavia. They also won this World's Smartest City award in 2019, and it topped Regional Innovation Scoreboard ranking as the most innovative region in 2021. They have a very long tradition of actor engagement and public-private cooperation in the field of life science, ICT, and product production management. They still maintain quite strong position in the financial sector, and they account for about more than 50% of all headquarters are located in Stockholm, and about 85% of all of them are foreign origin. It is a hotspot for tech startups, and some of them are well known, like Storytel, Skype, Spotify, things like that. It does has a very strong dynamic entrepreneurial ecosystem. So some of the Europe's leading economic and or business and technical schools are located in Stockholm, like Stockholm School of Economics, KTH, Royal Institute of Technology. And they have really quite a lot of different platforms for, well, a lot of accelerators and incubators, a lot of platforms for networking collaboration. One of the most known startup events, which is called Stockholm Startup Fest, I believe, is also hosted by Stockholm regularly. So there is really a very dynamic environment. They have some, as I said, top-level collaborative platforms, and they also have places for co-working, so where there's sharing workspaces together. And on the top of it, there is also favorable legislation, which really provides a lot of support to startups and well, entrepreneurship in general. So this is the environment, Stockholm, and I would just present a quote from one of the interviews, and which I think is very telling. It says that Stockholm is doing really well, and they have this sort of Silicon Valley culture, something which is really Stockholm driven, and it's understandable that local actors are satisfied and happy. So being, for instance, an entrepreneur, it opens a lot of, it provides a lot of opportunities for me. So I don't need to look for, let's say, public support. I can build my own strategic partnerships. I can find all the necessary infrastructure, funding as well. So everything is available. And so they might explain already that there might be a challenge of introducing something new in this context, or really get a buy-in from all these diverse stakeholders, which are happy and doing well in the environment that they already have. So that certainly requires a certain or more proactive role from the regional or public sector actors. So they need to take on a slightly different type of role to engage these different actors in the process of to enact this transformative change which is envisioned by smart specialization. So what do we found in this process? And Stockholm is a very interesting case when it comes to smart specialization, because right from the very beginning, one can say that this process was shaped and driven single-handed. So there was very few people allocated to this task. The other aspect is, given the status and size of Stockholm, the resources or like funds available for regional development is very limited. And also Region Stockholm, which is now responsible institution for regional development activities, they can supplement regional development funds with tax money, but politicians opted out. And that's because when you talk about specialization or prioritization, that immediately equals to selective favoritism, and they believe that once implemented, that would cost them vote, and they will not risk that. So this is something that is not done as well in this context. So right from the very beginning, there was very little internal political anchoring when it comes to smart specialization. So this has resulted in lack of mandate clarity, but also resources. So the people that were tasked with smart specialization responsibilities, they didn't have clear mandate and they didn't have any resources attached to them so that they could drive the process. So they would stuck in this hierarchical decision-making system when it comes to resource allocation and competence provision. So that really made this process quite problematic and with a lot of different challenges. Another problem, which is a little bit unique for Stockholm, is that inter-organizational task transfer took place in between. That means that smart specialization strategy started to take its shape, and when the County Administrative Board of Stockholm was responsible for that, but after several years, it was the responsibility was transferred to Region Stockholm that clearly lacked critical mass in terms of competences and resources to drive this process. And it's difficult to transfer knowledge and competences from one unit to another. So everything that was created and built, the dialects, the communication bridges, just common understanding or even creating a common vocabulary, everything was wasted after those years when this interorganizational transfer took place. So this partially explains the difficulty that Stockholm experienced. However, even before that, there were just a lot of so as I said, partially this can explain difficulties, but there's also even before, it was very difficult to organize or unite all these actors under this common flag, which is called regional development, where you could bring different stakeholders and really explain who's working with what and why do we need to make change and how to make it and what their role might be. So there was an attempt to bring them together. And again, all these events were orchestrated by, again, almost single-handed, or very, very few people that were involved in that. And it was appreciated. So there were quite a lot of actors that were invited and participated, and they thought that was a very good initiative. But when this individual change agents, they disappeared from the stage, it just immediately stopped, or there were these meetings were really short-lived. So they were not, they were just maintained by, or they were facilitated only by these public sector actors that were all very driven and engaged in the process, but they really didn't manage to awake a true interest and create common understanding about the actors so that it will continue in the future as well. So this is something that is really complex in such a city as Stockholm, because as I presented before, you see this is a very dynamic and very vibrant, very entrepreneurial city. So there are a lot of opportunities, and there is a very little interest of interacting with public sector, because there is, you can build it your own network and partnerships without a public intermediary. So this is something that, in this table, that was a summary of different policy traps, and in which one might fall when one's implementing smart specialization. And this is not just, as I said, it does not really depend whether this is a very innovative and well-performing region, or is it a lagging region. There is a risk of falling into these pitfalls for all of them. And in Stockholm, they managed to tick the box in all of these identified traps, which I try to briefly present to you. So what are the main conclusions of this process in Stockholm? As I said, like even very capable change agents may be caught in policy traps, and it always believed that decentralized systems, they are better fitted for facilitating this bottom-up policy process, but it's definitely not without its fault. So there is this risk, as in the case of Stockholm, just being trapped in this hierarchical resource planning and allocation decisions. It's very difficult. It's not enough to have one here, and smart specialization requires engagement and interaction of different actors, and they need to be engaged in probably, well, it shouldn't be a selective engagement, but it has to be a continuous engagement, probably at different stages of the process. So this is something that has to be, which in the case of Stockholm was quite difficult to achieve. The role, what was the most problematic, well, which probably can explain also some of the points mentioned about, is the even if you have a very competent actors that are very driven and can do actually a lot, but if they are not positioned strategically, and if they don't have this authority or power to drive the process and also mobilize and influence a wide range of actors, then it would be very difficult to achieve any result. And then in the case of Stockholm, that's what happened. It's very, yeah, this is what then now it said that regional development becomes more complex, and it's definitely difficult to control this process, but we can try to influence at some point. And what is important is to clarify mandates and also institutional arrangements of these capable change agents. They have to be embedded into this institutional arrangements, and that will also not just streamline the process, but it also add more transparency, accountability, and legitimacy. So based on that, also summarize some key points for policy, which is it's important to be very clear or define or redefine the role of leadership in policy design and implementation in order to enact a change in a certain context. So the growing complexity of this regional development does require systemic leadership that has to inspire and influence a wide range of actors and networks. And all these actors should be empowered through access to necessary resources. They have to be strategically also positioned in different formal and informal networks, and they have to be embedded in institutional arrangements that will enable them to exercise both power and influence. That's all from my part.
Okay, thank you very much, Iryna. Quite a provocative paper and argument and critique of smart specialization ideas in the context of really what's a most likely case for designing and delivering good smart specialization strategies, given that it's, you know, a Silicon Valley case, if you like, and also with a laissez-faire attitude to regional development strategies and smart specialization in particular.